Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this call. I'm sure everyone is just inundated with information, and the purpose of this call is to share information about what's the latest from the state government, the federal government, and also hopefully to get folks to share what's working and not working in their communities. We've got, as you all know, a wide range of types of members, and everyone has their own challenges, but this is something that's affecting the entire population. So we need to share as much information as possible. The other thing is, it's ever changing. We seem to get updates every hour or more, and it's hard to keep up. So hopefully this will give people some semblance of what's the latest and greatest information. LeadingAge National is also going to have a call today at 2:30 Central Time. So if you want to get that perspective as well, you're welcome to join that call. You can just go to the LeadingAge website to find that information. A couple of housekeeping items. We'd like everyone to stay on mute until you have questions and want to speak up. Do not put us, if you're on the phone, do not put us on hold because then your hold music will come on and they'll be very distracting. So please don't put us on hold. We have the chat feature on Zoom. So if you have questions, we'd like you to pose those questions in the chat if possible. We are going to open it up for some live questions as well. This is also going to be recorded. So if you miss any part of this, you can also, we're going to post on our website, and you can just play it again later and share it with other staff people. And we plan on doing this on a weekly basis, maybe more so, depending on what's happening. But right now, we're planning on doing it every Tuesday at this time. So put it on. I think we've been sending out some calendar invites on that, but we urge you to register for each one of those just so we have an accurate count of who's on the call. So I know this is a trying time for many, so I would want to start off by asking if anyone has anything positive to share. I know it's a tough time. I'm wondering if anyone has any positive stories to share with the rest of their membership about how they're coping, maybe some staff stories of them going above and beyond. But please, if anyone has anything to share, please unmute yourself and please share.
Hey, this is Nicole. I'll jump in and start. We certainly have had what we're calling God winks at our campus with our team and just our community at large. A couple of the things that I'll highlight is our team, it's really stepped up and agreed to work, on their days off. And we're staggering all of our team to work 7 days a week. So we're not following the normal rotational protocols, especially for administrative staff on Saturday and Sunday, to make sure we have adequate coverage to answer questions. And we're doing all intake through administration to reduce the traffic through our buildings. And so 65% of our campus is independent living, and we've taken on all food ordering, all supply ordering for our independent living residents as well to reduce their strain and stress, but that has put additional work onto us. So I'm really just proud of our team for doing that. And then the other story that I would share is we put a posting out on our Facebook that we were in need of additional golf carts because our campus is 25 acres. And when you're thinking about getting food deliveries for about 250 residents, there's a lot of transportation. And we had people that didn't know us from Adam in our community respond to that. And the best story I can tell you is one member showed up and he was in gloves and protective equipment. We didn't tell him to do this. He had sanitized his golf cart, changed the oil filter, filled it up with gas, bought us the rain guard and several other components that were basket attachments so that we could put all these deliveries and drive them around our campus. So he basically gave us about a $15,000 piece of equipment without knowing us, was simply a handshake, delivered it to us and said, keep it as long as you need it. And so our community also has responded to say they will be runners for our residents who need groceries and supplies and, bring them out and drop them off. So we've just been really happy, obviously, to see all that outpouring of support. It is a trying time, but I think it's also filled with the best of humanity and what they can do as well.
Great story. I know we have Amanda Marr on from LeadingAge National. Do you want to give an update of what's happening from the national perspective right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, George. Can everyone hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Yes.
Thumbs up? Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Vice President of Communications and Marketing at LeadingAge. So as you can imagine, we've also been busy. So I wanted to tell you about a few things that we're doing at the LeadingAge National to help you manage, the day-to-day right now. First of all, we have an ever-evolving website. We are, as things change almost hourly, seemingly, we are updating our website. And you can go to our landing page, leadingage.org, and there's a link right when you hit the, it says learn more, right on the front page. Takes you right to our coronavirus website. We also have general information for everyone, and then we have 7 setting specific pages with detailed information. So we're updating that frequently. We also do have some crisis communications related templates on there that you can use. One of them is how to talk to media if your community has been impacted, if you have been affected resident or more. So that can be really helpful. So some communications related pieces on there. Let's see, we have in our My Member community, which is our online forum, formerly known as listservs, we have just added a new COVID-19 group, and that's really a place for members to have communications, to share best practices, what's working, what's not working, sort of thinking outside the box, and also a place for finding support. So if you go to my.leadingage.org, you sign into your account, you will see an option to join the new member community. If you have any questions, you can call LeadingAge or send an email to info@leadingage.org. And so as George mentioned, we are about to start a series, it's daily calls. We're gonna give it a try. We're hoping people join. So every day at 2:30 Central Time, our policy team will be getting on the phone. They're gonna give you updates about whatever's the latest announcement from CMS or HUD or what have you. And then they will open the call to members for questions. So it's a great sort of, literally daily. We're going to do it Saturday and Sunday as well. So if you have questions, that's a great place to go for information. So that's you can register for that from the link on our website. We also send out a newsletter every Wednesday. It's called LeadingAge Need to Know, but we are now going to be sending it out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I mean, our whole idea here is we recognize that people get their information in different ways. We want to make sure everyone has access to it. So if you haven't signed up or you don't get LeadingAge Need to Know, you can again sign into your LeadingAge account and select under subscription options, select LeadingAge Need to Know. It's our weekly email. And let's see. I think that's, well, also in general, we are letting members know that we are suspending almost all other kinds of communication with members except for coronavirus related information. So Doesn't mean that we're not still doing things behind the scenes, but we're recognizing that we don't want to overly inundate your inboxes with information that we know you can't deal with right now. So, you know, once things get back to normal, whatever that means, we will be sort of picking back up the pace. But if you have a specific question, feel free to email your usual contact at LeadingAge, or again, the info@leadingage.org. So I think that's it from us.
Amber, I can't find the link on the national site for the call.
Okay, I'll look into that. Make sure it's there.
That's
Yeah,
okay. I can post it to the chat here. Just a second.
Okay, I'm going to now turn it over to Elise Meyer, VP of Advocacy, and she's been keeping track of what's been happening on the policy front. This has been changing again almost hourly. So we're going to share with you the sort of the latest information we have. Just know again to keep checking our website, because everything that we learn, we post there, and so you'll get the most up-to-date information. So I'm going to turn it over to Elise.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I know there's been a lot of information communicated by both CMS, CDC, Texas HHSC. So I wanted to just go over several highlights and also share some conversations we've had with the agency directly, and recent communications with the governor's office as well. And then I encourage you, as you think of questions, write them in the group chat, and then we'll also get to submitted questions through the link on the registration page toward the end of the call. But hopefully you all have kept up with the CMS guidance for nursing facilities regarding infection control practices, as well as visitor restrictions. Yesterday, the state also restricted non-essential visitors to hospitals in Texas. So these types of practices are ramping up across several healthcare settings. We are anticipating a provider letter for assisted living facilities to be released by Texas HHSC either today or first thing tomorrow morning. Based on conversations we had with the agency on Friday, that guidance should look very similar to that of the nursing facility guidance with regard to visitor restrictions specifically. So be on the lookout for that if you are an assisted living provider for essentially a mandate by the state during this time. I also want to share with nursing facility providers that as of today, CMS has instructed, I believe, all 50 states to suspend routine survey inspections. So if survey comes into your building for what they are saying is a routine survey inspection, please contact us as soon as possible. This hasn't been formally communicated to providers yet, but we anticipate a formal communication either today or tomorrow. However, survey may still come into a nursing facility for a focused infection control survey, or to investigate an IJ or priority 1 level complaint, or to lift an IJ. So survey can come in under those circumstances. However, the state and federal routine survey should be suspended at this time. For housing providers, hopefully you have seen the communications from LeadingAge with regard to suspension of HUD inspections for right now. And if you haven't, I believe it's on LeadingAge's resource page, but HUD inspections should also be suspended at this time. And wanted to just share a couple highlights from our call with HHSC Regulatory on Friday. We had a first call with all long-term care provider associations as well as leadership at the agency, and wanted to share a couple best practices that were discussed on that call. We know PPE is a huge concern for members and ensuring that you have access to adequate PPE. The agency instructed that facilities should shoot for an adequate supply of PPE, being 48 to 72 hours worth of supply. If you are unable to access that amount of supply through your vendors and regular shipments or suppliers, you're instructed to contact your local health department to make sure that you've communicated a shortage or an at-risk of shortage, so you eliminate any risk of being cited potentially later. So make sure as you're keeping track of inventory, you're communicating any potential shortages to your local health department contacts. And if you don't know who those are, we've posted a directory on our resource page that's been made available through Department of State Health Services. So if you haven't reached out, make sure you reach out just so you're on the radar. I'll also just share a couple highlights from the communication we recently submitted to Health and Human Services and the Governor's Office. We're asking that both Health and Human Services and the Governor consider several requests to help relieve providers during this time. Several are centered around workforce and staffing. We've asked for certain childcare licensing regulations to be reduced or looked at to provide adequate childcare options given the event of an outbreak and now these school closures. So there are several options on the table. The Governor's Office and the Health and Human Services Commission are looking at various options to help aid both the workforce and child care providers. We've also requested that facilities or communities that have the resources and space available may be able to allow children onto campus. I will say that that request has been denied in other states due to just the risk to residents and having children on larger multi-level community campuses, but we did make that request. We're also asking that non-certified staff or ancillary staff and even volunteers are able to provide certain care and services in the event of a staff shortage with some expedited training. A couple other large asks, we're asking that long-term care providers be prioritized in terms of access to PPE. We are also asking for long-term care providers to be priority for available testing kits. We're also asking for several different waivers related to continuing education requirements, licensure and certification requirements of regulated facilities, and then several requests regarding emergency funding, both Medicaid and other types of funding mechanisms should facility be in need and having to respond to an outbreak. One other thing, and we're waiting to receive information, but there was a declaration by the president. There may be some FEMA assistance available for healthcare providers. We're getting more information on that, who that applies to. But that declaration was made, I believe, on Friday of last week also. That's it.
Okay. Let me also comment that the other thing that happened last week was that CMS rescinded the 3-day stay requirement for nursing facilities to accept hospital patients. My thought on that is that hospitals are going to try and clear out as much as they can to accommodate what we hope is not going to happen, but could happen, is a huge influx of cases that they're going to have beds for. So, so I would just ask our members to just be prepared for a possible influx of new short-term residents, at least for rehab. So, so that's also happening at the same time. One of the other things that, we talked a little bit about nursing facilities and assisted living, which their statement's going to come out tomorrow, I believe, on new regs for that, which are going to be similar to nursing facilities. But, a lot of our members are CCRCs and have independent living. Corey McDonald, who's our attorney, has drafted some memos on this, and I want to ask him to say a few words about what CCRCs or life plan communities can, what sort of restrictions they can put on residents coming in and out of their facility. That is happening again everywhere across the country. In California, they've asked anyone over 65 to just shelter in place. I don't know if that's going to happen in Texas or not, but I think we all have to prepare for any eventuality here. So, Corey, do you want to talk a little bit about what's happening with life plan?
Yeah, can you unmute him? Click news. Hold on, Corey.
Corey, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Click on his video. No, he's on the phone.
I think. All right, while Corey is trying to unmute himself, maybe we can share some stories on what communities are doing right now. I know that there has not been a lot of guidance yet for HUD communities. Rocky, I asked Rocky to say a few words about what's happening at Plano as a standalone HUD community that is not connected to a CCRC. Rocky, can you say a few words?
Yes. George, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
I guess we'll let Corey go first, and then we'll have Rocky. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so let me just give a little bit of an overview of what I've been doing with this. I do think that those providers that have a continuum of care on their campus and multiple levels of care should take all reasonable measures or all within reason measures to try to keep folks out. And so what I've been doing is kind of in this policy that I gave to LeadingAge Texas, and which I'm going to update today, I'm suggesting the approach of essentially applying at least the visitation and screening processes for all settings on the campus, those processes that are required under the provider letter for nursing homes, applying them to all settings on the campus if possible. And so I know that there are, actual geographic layout challenges with, restricting entry if possible to one place, examples of the variations that you can find there. Some folks have, obviously if they're in cottages or executive homes, they, may have their own entrance and egress or access points. But to the extent possible, I think the goal should be to really try and restrict entry. And in this policy I've prepared, I'm suggesting at this point, really trying to strongly discourage people from leaving really for any reason. And the approach I've taken with that in this policy, and I'm not on the ground, and so I'm definitely curious for feedback, and I can share some feedback I've received. But, if at all possible, really having people, if they're going to leave, say where they're going, commit in writing, if possible, again, to the fact that they're not going to go to a place where there are more than, at this point, I'm saying 50 people. Now, this number is changing. If you watch the White House press conference today, they used 10 people and 25 people. But I really do think residents, at a minimum, need to understand that if they're leaving the community, they are not guaranteed the right to come back. Again, for whatever purpose, really, but in particular for travel outside of the city or town, and again with going to places that basically exceed recommended numbers for gatherings at this point in time. The challenge with that, there's several challenges. One is the legal rights that people have under their residency agreement. Obviously, most agreements are not going to speak with this level of specificity about any situation of this sort, but certainly people could, in the future, make some sort of claim for wrongful eviction, or some other kind of access to their units. One thing I've tried to build into this document, and this is really not a one-size-fits-all. People have to think about what they want to commit to and not commit to. But what I've put into this document is the idea that you will, at a minimum, commit to sort of equitably adjusting monthly charges should it come about that someone can't re-access the unit. I'm not saying, this document that I've created doesn't say that you will guarantee that they'll be reimbursed monthly fees should they be essentially, prohibited from coming back, but at least says that you will, strive to, like I said, equitably adjust those charges. That's something that, I think could be in the policy or not in the policy, but to the extent you're, trying to give people some reassurance should they essentially not be able to come back, that might be helpful to put in there. This is an evolving situation. Like I said today, yesterday when I wrote the policy, I said if you're going to a place with 50 or more people, today it's looking like 10 to 25 might be more appropriate. And in general, what I've been trying to do with this is stay at least a little ahead of the regulators in terms of what they're saying. As Elise and George have said, we're hoping for some guidance from HHSC regarding assisted living facilities and essentially being, given the green light to take the same approach with visitors, with the nursing facility, take that same approach in assisted living as is being taken in the nursing facility setting. It would be nice to have the regulators saying that that's, authorized and encouraged. But without that, I do feel like even with the risk of, potential claims under residency agreements for not being able to be in their units, my general feeling, my gut is that those issues are not, when you're comparing the risk of what happened in Kirkland, the Kirkland facility up near Seattle, relative to the risk of contractual claims related to the residency agreement, I personally would rather see you defending the residency agreement challenges, breach of contract, than I would want you to be dealing with claims related to resident deaths. So I do think taking a harder line than the regulators have authorized is probably the way to go. Now there's a pretty big range of the line to take, from strongly discouraging people from going to places with that many people, to outright saying people have to stay in their units in the community. And so I am not at a point where I'm comfortable with the idea exactly of saying, look, everyone in here has to stay in their units. That is a judgment call. It may get to that point, but just we're all kind of working with new information here, and my overall sense is that we're in for somewhat of a long haul, and we're going to be balancing both this serious risk to residents' health with also just maintaining a decent quality of life, and the fact that people are not going to necessarily have access to family members and friends the way they used to. So the idea of going to sort of full internal quarantine, really kind of pushes against there's that balancing with quality of life that I'm, wanting people to try to balance. One other issue that I talked to the LeadingAge Texas folks about this morning is, again, this sort of this policy that I prepared for resident departures and visitation is evolving. And one thing I've been thinking about today is the situation of applying, do you apply the nursing facility guidance to the entire campus? Well, one way that does not seem feasible at this point in time, and may not even be feasible in the nursing home itself, is that the federal guidance recommends, recommends stopping communal dining and activities within the facility. My reading of the federal provider letter is that it's a recommendation and it's not a requirement. However, it does say in that provider letter that states can go beyond what the federal government has said in that letter. And so in Texas, what we've had is basically a press release from the governor's office, which has been repeated by HHSC, in which they say, in regard to the federal provider letter, that it is requiring adherence with certain parts of it. It does not, and it refers to the visitation issues. Again, this is the Texas press release, talks about requiring providers to follow the visitation issues, the visitation guidance, the access issues. It doesn't say anything about communal dining in the press release. It doesn't say anything about activities. And in fact, LeadingAge Texas was provided a draft form of what would have been a Texas provider letter, and that really did focus on the visitation and access issues, and it didn't say anything about the communal dining or activities within the nursing facility. So I am under the impression and under the current belief that Texas has not said you are barred from communal dining in nursing facilities. I think there's obviously a question for people, a decision for people to make in those areas based on staffing, based on maybe some level of risk tolerance, obviously based on resident mental health and well-being, on how to balance that. I at this point would not advocate, to the extent you are broadening the federal guidance for nursing facilities to the rest of your community, if you have a continuum of care, I am not advocating at this point cutting off communal dining. I'm kind of in the middle on that issue. But I do think in the dining settings, if at all possible, figuring out ways to maybe spread out dining times or, create space between people would probably be something to consider, even if you're not ending communal dining. So those are some of the areas I'm focusing on. I will update this policy for resident access and visitation and send that to LeadingAge Texas for them to put on their website. There are going to be some blanks in there, such as with regard to the extent you are saying that you're striving to meet, the visitation and access guidance for nursing facilities. To the extent you're applying that, there's some place to put in what exactly you're doing in that regard, so you can kind of tailor it, and some other notes in there for ways to tailor it on an individual community basis. And I
Okay,
apologize.
thank you, Corey. We want to save some time for some questions. I know we've got some other people on the line who can probably add some more content, but the purpose of this call is to share information. So we've had some questions in advance. So Elise is going to read off some of those questions.
Sure, I'll go through the questions we received in advance and then we can go over to the group chat. One question we received from a nursing facility provider was whether or not they should admit new patients into their facility. We'll also be making these questions and answers available through a shareable Google Doc that members will be able to view following this call. But to answer that question, per CMS's most recent guidance, there's no restriction for admitting new patients at this time. The most recent guidance actually speaks to this issue. There is a no nursing home should admit any individuals that they would normally admit to their facility, including individuals from hospitals where a case of COVID-19 was or is present. Also, if possible, dedicate a unit wing exclusively for any residents coming or returning from the hospital. This can serve as a step-down unit where they remain for 14 days with no symptoms, instead of integrating as usual on short-term rehab floor or returning to long-stay original room. So that language is in the guidance, the most recent guidance to answer that question. So question regarding routine surveys, I already answered that. Those should be suspended. Medicaid eligibility renewals, will they be waived and coverage extended for beneficiaries during this time? States have the flexibility to extend Medicaid eligibility periods for beneficiaries. We have requested that eligibility periods are extended. That request went into HHSC and the governor's office, so we hope to receive word on that shortly. Another question regarding independent living or HUD housing, more specifically, does anyone know what will happen if a case comes to a community? Will we be required to go under quarantine, et cetera, and so forth? HUD's Office of Multifamily Housing did release a question and answer document to help housing providers navigate COVID-19. And that resource is available on the website, both LeadingAge and LeadingAge Texas's website under resources. And that does give some direction as to emergency preparedness in regard to COVID-19 and potential for quarantine if somebody is diagnosed in your community. So we would refer housing providers to that. And then Corey really just answered, received a couple questions regarding communal dining. Corey spoke to that issue. We can move to the questions. Can you scroll to the top? Thank you. One question regarding ideas for daycare for children of staff. Again, we've asked for flexibility, potential vouchers, financial assistance, dedicated daycares for healthcare workforce, and hope to receive some type of response from the governor and HHSC shortly. One question, when is it time to lock down your independent living side of your community if we have to do lockdown? Can we allow home health agencies in? Corey, did you want to just speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I would advise, what locking down means is a big question here. And what I'm suggesting is probably could be described as locking down, which is controlling access, limiting access to the degree that CMS has said for nursing facilities. And in that regard, CMS, with regard to nursing facilities, is not saying to bar all healthcare providers. So I would encourage reviewing that guidance from CMS and considering, adopting it. I want to pull it up right now, but it goes into details about how you check people that are coming in, and I certainly would apply those to, everyone that's coming in.
Okay, the next question, if you have city food permits in independent living, and if the city county have restricted restaurants to drive-through or takeout, does that restrict IL to only to-go orders?
I mean, say that again, Elise.
If you have a city food permits in independent living, and if the city county have restricted restaurants to drive-through or takeout, does that restrict IL to only provide to-go orders to their residents?
That's a good question, and I think we need to look into that and talk about it a little bit. A related note that I want to point out, just while you brought up local government, which is a big part of all this, is that in certain areas, I know in Williamson County and Travis County, local health authorities have sent out letters to providers basically saying they're not making any distinction. They're called control orders, and they're kind of the local version of a emergency declaration, and they are not drawing distinctions between levels of care, between assisted living, nursing, and independent living. As far as I've seen, they're just saying senior care facilities and facilities that are with, that are caring for vulnerable people. And so this doesn't answer that question directly, but just to the point of what the local governments do, obviously be on the lookout for those letters. And to the extent you're feeling some discomfort or concern with taking a more aggressive approach, I do think it's helpful for justifying and explaining your actions if you've received one of those letters that, again, doesn't differentiate between the provider types. So just want to point that out. And we'll look into the impact of dining restrictions on the local level on dining facilities within senior housing communities.
Okay. First one. If you continue communal dining, a recommendation is handing out warm washcloths with antimicrobial soap as a part of the dining experience. So that's one recommendation provided by a member. Anyone working to move residents out of independent living to family if possible. Heard of a large high-rising considering this to reduce occupancy.
I haven't heard of that yet.
Are any independent living members working to move residents out? Okay. Is there any guidance on how much notice might be given if there is a quarantine zone, not a specific building or community, put into place that would restrict travel in a given area? Much notice? No, I haven't heard of a standard timeline or notice that would be given if there's a quarantine zone designated, but we can.
I think talking about what happened in New York and New Rochelle, just north of New York City, where they quarantined like a 2 square mile area, and I don't think there was much notice. I think it was like a 24-hour notice that they gave, but I think it's up to the local authorities to decide that.
Also, another comment that HUD will be hosting a call tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Central. We will post that call and information on the resource page. Juliana just posted it in the group chat, so you can see that phone number and passcode. That will focus on HUD and COVID tomorrow. Our members, the next question is whether members are still allowing private sitters in their nursing centers.
If you have a comment, please take yourself off mute and let us know what you're doing.
I do think just, as we wait for some feedback from members on that, that is an interesting question because of, at least to the extent you're applying the, following the recommendations from CMS, it does make exceptions to restrictions on visitation for healthcare workers, presuming you're following guidelines for screening. That's not clear to me how that should be applied to sitters. I think there's some room there. Again, I'm kind of coming from the general standpoint that the CMS letter is recommendations as opposed to flat out requirements. Now, the Texas letter says nursing facilities must, so they take it from recommendation to requirement, also implement screening protocols for anyone entering their facility. They must screen staff, medical professionals, and other essential visitors. They also say, prevent must now, that facilities are now required to prevent non-essential visitors. I don't read the Texas guidance as barring sitters explicitly, so I can't speak to what folks are doing, but I think that, that's one of those items that's in that sort of gray area. And, if you can screen effectively, they definitely provide valuable service to some residents.
Okay. Let me just also say the HUD call is actually at 1:30 tomorrow. Just a clarification. We also have Juliana Bilovich from LeadingAge National. She's Director of Housing Operations and Policy. Juliana, do you have any comments about what's happening in that world?
Hey there, this is Juliana. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, first of all, I just want to say really good information shared so far, and a huge shout out to everybody who is working overtime to, support the older adults in our communities and our lives. So just a thank you to everybody who's working extra hard right now. So at LeadingAge National, we've really been pressing HUD to put out some more guidance to support you folks. And so the good news is that I just heard from HUD that they are planning to put out some more guidance in the next few days. So that, of course, is not in writing yet, so I can't, promise anything or guarantee anything, but it looks like some relief will be coming down the pike. So that's good news. And then the other thing I wanted to point to was the Q&A doc that was mentioned is being continually updated. So that's available on the HUD multifamily webpage. And that received an update late last night. It's going to get another one either today or early tomorrow before that national call. And that just, the more questions we pose to them, the more in-depth the answers become from them. So that's, that's good news. And that also says to us to keep sending in all these questions. So, either you guys send them in directly or send them to us. We are really keeping an eye on that, making that a top priority to get that question over to HUD, those questions over to HUD. In the meantime, we are also pushing Congress to appropriate emergency dollars for folks to be able to, get extra staff, get emergency rental assistance to folks, just whatever people need on the ground to be able to address this. And, I do have more details about, the REACT, the inspections, MORs, infectious disease protocol in HUD buildings, but I know we're short on time, so whatever folks have questions about, I'm happy to address it if I can.
Okay, thank you. Also want to, I know some people are having trouble getting their phones off mute, but just in the chat, St. Dominic's Village has restricted all sitters and have stopped communal dining for all levels of care. I believe 7 Acres has done the same thing. The village at Incarnate Word extended nursing home a visitation mandate to all assisted living and memory care, and families have been completely understanding that, no negative response. Another question, can we go over the request for at-risk shortage of PPE and how we go about requesting this?
So again, that if you're unable to reach, or if you're unable to get your supply replenished by your current vendors, you have run out of options, you are instructed to contact your local health department to make it known that you are either experiencing a shortage or at risk of a shortage. The agency recommends that you have 48 to 72 hours worth of PPE on hand. So if you do not have that, we would just encourage you to take time to reach out to your local health department, as they may be able to assist you in accessing those additional supplies based on what you report.
Couple other feedback. The Wesleyan is allowing personal caregivers at this time, but they're screening per the recommendations. The Legacy at Willow Bend has stopped communal dining. So,
and then 48 to 72 hours on hand for how many residents? This was actually something we talked about at length. We communicated to the agency that it's unlikely that any facility would have set 48 or 72 hours on hand for all of their residents, but that is the recommendation. So as long as you're communicating again with the local health department contact that you do not have that on hand, be specific, be explicit, just so it is documented that you have reached out.
okay.
Here's a comment.
Okay.
So just a comment, many communities we are working with that have stopped visitation have increased technology usage, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, especially for higher levels of care, to visit with families and keep morale high.
I guess that's a question I would pose to the group. And if we can get some folks off mute, that would be helpful if we can get some conversation going. This is likely to be going on for at least several weeks. And I know we're just at the front end of this. And what are you doing to keep staff morale high and keep families engaged? Because this is going to be a long haul and people are going to get antsy, basically sitting at home for or sitting in a room for that long a period of time. So wanted to get anybody's feedback on that.
I'll share, this is Michelle, an idea I like the idea of Zoom, where you can get multiple family members together in one call. It almost feels like you're at a family gathering. And so it may be worth scheduling for residents times with their families that everybody dials in and has kind of a little get together like this.
Okay, good.
Hey, this is Wendy at Christian Care, and Linked Senior is offering a webinar, I believe it is tomorrow, for life enrichment personnel to talk about the CDC Health Department guidelines how to run activities in their department given COVID-19 and how to take care of themselves. So there is some special life enrichment courses being offered, and that's through linkedsenior.com. We're asking all of our life enrichment team members to register for that and attend.
Okay, some other feedback from some of the questions we asked earlier. 7 Acres is not allowing private sitters in the nursing home, but in the assisted living for now. Carinthia is allowing essential visitors only during all personal care, including all personal caregivers. Have stopped communal dining, but are putting residents that need assistance with meals 6 feet apart at bedside tables in the main dining room so they can assist them with feeding and keep an eye on them.
Does the 48, 72-hour PPE only being applied to the healthcare setting only? So this isn't a mandate. This is a recommendation based on our communication with HHSC. So we are encouraging written documentation that you've connected, that you've made clear what type of supplies are at risk or you are in need of, so the local health department may assist you in getting adequate supplies if need be. Let's see. I got on the call late. I got on the, is there any update on the emergency FMLA bill in Congress or the Senate?
I understand the concern on this Family Medical Leave Act that's part of the emergency bill now on the virus. And the concern is in the original draft of the bill, they have stipulations that people can take sick time for childcare. And I know that I think LeadingAge and several other associations spoke up about this, that it would decimate the healthcare workforce if folks could just simply take time off for childcare. So it's still under consideration. I don't know what's going to happen, but we are aware that this is a huge concern, not just us, but in hospitals and other healthcare settings.
So there's a way for employers to opt out of the new temporary paid leave guidelines. And I have a chart that locked-in companies sent out, if that would be helpful. I don't know how to post it in chat, but I can email it to someone if someone would like it.
Yeah, email it over to us and we'll get it posted.
You got it.
Do we consider IL and PPE count from a regulatory standpoint? The answer is no. With regard to reporting your PPE supply, that is only applicable to nursing facility settings at this time. What type of PPE are we needing to have for the 48 or 72 hours? Again, this is just a recommendation and a way to ensure that you've communicated any potential shortages. Should an outbreak occur in your facility, you want to make sure you're communicating with the local health department your PPE supplies and notifying them of any at-risk or current shortages.
Just some other words of sort of suggestions of what folks are doing. Some people are doing virtual gatherings using Zoom and offering website visitors additional ways to engage. So I think people are looking at just being more innovative in the way that they're communicating with with the public and with family members, et cetera. Okay. I know I asked Rocky Christensen if she had any sort of from a individual HUD community perspective, what they were doing. Rocky, you able to unmute? Okay. Okay, any final questions? We've gone through about an hour. The LeadingAge national call is going to start in less than 30 minutes. Remember, next week's call, we're going to have an epidemiologist online to talk about the virus and talk about infection control and all those things. So make sure you get your clinical staff and others to join us on this call, because I think it'll be important for them to hear some of that information.
Yes.
Hey, Marcia, can you get off mute, or Kelly from the Wesleyan?
Okay.
Hi, this is Kelly.
Hey, you want to talk about what's happening at Wesleyan and hear what's.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you to everyone in LeadingAge Texas and LeadingAge National. The resources that y'all are sending to us has tremendously saved a lot of time as we are trying to draft letters and different things for our family members. So one of the things, and I mean, I think we are all doing a lot of the same things as far as screenings and stuff, but one of the big focuses from a clinical standpoint is really educating the teammates. A lot of our teammates have a lot of fear and anxiety, as to the disease process and understanding it. So we are really spending a lot of time with the frontline team. We've developed some teaching presentations, educational presentations that we've gone over with them. I feel like the more they understand, they can relay that message to family members when they're talking to them. So that's been a big focus from the clinical standpoint. Also, I wanted to mention we implemented a respiratory screen in PCC as a template for all of our new admissions. So I don't know in your EMAR systems if that's something, it is the questionnaire that's recommended. So we are doing that on all of our new admissions that are coming in, along with any change in condition for the residents. So that's just some of the extra clinical things we've implemented. And today we're actually implementing a surveillance of temperatures on every resident, every shift in our every resident daily in our skilled nursing buildings.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Sure.
I will add that while we're on the call, I heard from LeadingAge Virginia, they just had their first case in a member community. I know in New Orleans, they've had 3 cases in a member community, all in independent living. This is something that we need to, again, remain vigilant on and try and prevent the spread as much as we can. So I know everyone's doing the best. We're trying to, again, keep you as updated as we can with the latest and greatest information. Please visit our website often, our resource page for the information, and that's being updated all the time. So I remind you again, we're going to meet next week at this same time. If we need to do another call in addition to that, depending on what happens, it changes day by day, we'll alert you to that. But I encourage you to go ahead and register for next week's call already, because there'll be a lot more information by then.
I just wanted to reiterate to everyone, you could submit a question at any time using that link at the top of the resource page. We're monitoring that live and answering the questions if we can as they come in. And as I mentioned before, we'll be posting those questions and answers on the resource page as well. So don't hold your questions for next week. And staff is here to assist in anything, so don't hesitate to reach out to us throughout this time. We're here to help you.
Okay, any last minute? Again, we started the meeting off with some nice information, nice positive news from Nicole about them getting a golf cart donated. Does anybody else have something positive to share that we can end the call with? Silence is golden. I think a lot of people are having trouble with the mute, with unmuting.
Yeah, I'll share something positive.
Okay, hey Bill.
I saw in the news last night that chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are showing high effectiveness in helping people recover and actually prevent it. So there's going to be a big paper that comes out about those two well-known antivirals very soon. And that could actually be something that could really help in the higher levels of care where you have people, that need to get well from it as soon as possible.
Okay, well that's some hopeful news.
Okay.
Yeah, you asked for good news. I was pretty happy to hear that last night. It's got great results.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone's attention.
Okay, guys, from the West Center, I must say, you can't see me very well. Hold on real quick.
Okay.
I dressed up as a leprechaun for 100 residents with dementia and staff.
Okay.
When you're locked
There
in,
you
you
go.
know.
Great costume.
I know, and I do own one. That's the scary part. So this could be a good outfit to have.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
That's a great note.
We'll make sure we get through the questions in the chat box again and post those on the live Q&A page that we'll create if anything went unanswered.
Okay, thanks everyone.